Welcome, everybody. This is Kate Hurley, one of the co-founders of the Million Cat Challenge, and I'm so glad you were able to take time away from your busy life to spend a little while talking with us about the former bane of my existence, and now one of my favorite topics, how we can defeat feline upper respiratory infection in shelters. So with that, I'd like to introduce our two fabulous speakers, Dr. Cynthia Karsten and Dr. Ann Enright. Dr. Karsten is actually calling in from her office about 15 steps from mine. She graduated from the University of Wisconsin School of Veterinary Medicine in 2010, went on to complete a shelter medicine internship at Colorado State University, and then we lured her straight over here to join us at the UC Davis Shelter Medicine program, where she completed a residency in 2014, and where she is serving proudly as the outreach veterinarian and advising shelters, performing focused and comprehensive shelter consults, presenting at conferences and universities. And her interests include population management, infectious disease control, Chihuahua relocation, and community medicine. She shares our immense concern for not only the animals in shelters, but all of you who work so diligently every day to take care of them. By contrast to Dr. Karsten 15 steps away, Dr. Ann Enright is calling all the way from Victoria, Australia today, where she diligently called into our fellowship group for the last year at 2 o'clock in the morning due to the time difference. And I just Googled that, and I couldn't tell actually how far it is in miles, but I can tell you it is 18 hours and $1,373 away. So thank you so much, Ann, for joining us from all the way over there. Ann's interest in shelter medicine actually started in her final year rotations at vet school with a 1-month shelter rotation at the RSPCA in Cat Haven. Once out of school, she completed the UF Graduate Certificate in Shelter Medicine, and she took a 2-week locum position at the Cat Protection Society of Victoria in February 2016. And she just couldn't leave, so she was hired on full-time in August 2016 and is still their lead veterinarian. She had also just begun looking for conferences with a shelter medicine focus and happened upon the 2016 HSUS Expo that had a shelter medicine track with presentations by shelter medicine fellows from the University of Wisconsin UC Davis Shelter Medicine Fellowship Program. We were delighted when she joined that program last year. So I'm not going to give away what they're going to talk about, but what I just want to say is that this will show you why we love the fellowship program, because it allows us to take our theories and ideas that we develop here at the universities and see how they actually play out in practice. Sometimes we learn that we have to go back to the drawing board. But sometimes, like this time, we find they work out way better than we expected, and they have an impact way beyond even the problem that we were intending to solve. And that's really what I love about the Million Cat Challenge, too. You take the ideas that are out there in the world, that are floating around, you put them into practice, and then you tell us what works. And that allows us to share it with all of you and magnify the benefit way beyond what even one shelter can achieve. So just a reminder, if you haven't joined the challenge, please join at millioncatchallenge.org. And if you're part of the challenge, thank you so much. Without further ado, Drs. Karsten and Enright, take it away.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Ann and I are so excited to be here to share our experiences from working in shelters and what we've learned from the current research that has brought us really to a new understanding of this central issue of URI that we all face as we manage and care for cats in our shelters. We hope that everyone out there can glean something, anything from this, an aha moment that will allow you to implement some change so that URI isn't running our lives anymore, and instead we can invest our time, our resources, and our energy into something else, right? Maybe we can expand an existing program or implement a new program, or heck, maybe even take a day off. Because ultimately, we all want to feel like we're on top of what we're doing and that URI is not seeming to be in control of what we're trying to do, which really is to provide great welfare not only for our animals in our shelter, but also for the staff who work so hard to care for them. So, we all have thoughts on URI. These are mine that I think I share with a lot of you. This has come from my experience and my training. in my education is that we all were really looking for this magic something to treat our URI. And let me just say, I don't think any of us enjoy treating cats with medications. I don't think anyone would say that is the perfect part of their job. And we really have come to understand that lysine, it is not working for us in shelters. We've found little, if any, help with prevention and treatment of URI with lysine. And I think we've had just gotten to this point that sheltering meant URI in cats, and we just kind of had thrown up our hands to that. So this is where we were, and so I don't think any of us could say we wanted to stay here. So this really made us all want to start to look for preventative measures. Since we didn't have something that was great for treating, what can we do so that our cats don't even get sick? And we know so much that vaccines are so important in shelters, but this is not the place where we can rely on vaccines to control URI. We do not get sterile immunity, and the jury is still out in terms of intranasal vaccines. Some shelters find they help, some shelters find they don't, or even make it worse. So that really needs to be an individual shelter option if they're going to use that or not. And we know that our cats don't have the lung capacity that our dogs have, so really URI is not thought of so much as an airborne illness. It's really more fomites and, as we all know in our own lives, stress. This is another place where we've learned a ton, is how we house our cats, both individually and in groups, and how dense we house them is a huge impact on how much sickness we see in our shelters. So we know that there are risk factors out there, but what we need to know is what are they? What are the biggest risk factors for our cats to develop URI? So we set out to look at it. And not yet in publication, but soon to be on news shelves everywhere, was a research project here out of UC Davis with a goal to try to identify what are the biggest risk factors for URI. So thus leading us to know what we can change within our shelters to help prevent this illness. 9 shelters were involved, and they completed questionnaires that asked 47 different questions. In fact, that tried to paint the picture of everything that was going on in that shelter. So how animals were housed, how long were they staying, how close were they, were the species combined, anything we could think of that could be impacting the level of disease that was in the shelters. Because what it showed from looking at these shelters was there was a 50-fold difference between the shelters in the level of URI that we're seeing. So it wasn't just a cat going into a shelter that created URI. There was something about the shelters that created the different levels. And overall, within the shelters, about 17% of cats that came in developed URI. And between the shelters, it was somewhere as low as 3% of the cats admitted that got sick, up to about 29%. So what was it? What was it that was creating this difference? And 2 things were found to be the biggest factors, significant in that were protective against the effects of adults getting URI in the shelter. And the first one was how many times a cat was moved during their first week of stay at the shelter. And now if you think about your shelter and so many shelters that I've been in, that you've all been in, cats tend to come into intake. They may spend their stray hold there. Tends to be caging like this, generally not real pretty because we're not worried about the public seeing it. Then they get to move up to adoption, which tends to be prettier and more spacious. And hopefully this is all happening quickly, but that's a lot of movement from intake to holding to adoption. And if we don't have compartmentalized housing, a lot of times we have to move the cats out for cleaning, which is considered a move. So instead, if you can think about your shelter and use something that is known as direct kenneling, where you can put a cat maybe right onto the adoption floor because they're friendly, and they can either do their stray hold up there or go straight up for adoption. But being able to put an animal where they're going to stay for the majority of their time in shelter is a huge help in reducing the stress that the cat experiences and thus the amount of illness that they will succumb to. So, movement of animals, of the cats within the first week is one of the significant risk factors for developing URI. The second one was space per housing unit. More than 8 square feet of floor space per adult cat was protective against getting sick. So giving our cats this much space kept them healthy. And we really like it when this space can be compartmentalized to allow the cat to eat and sleep away from where they're going to the bathroom. So, two biggest things, movement and space. Some things that weren't a factor that I just want to touch on quickly was size of the shelter. So the bigger shelters didn't see more URI, so that was not a correlation. So applying these two protective principles to any size shelter is protective. It's not based on the intake size. The other thing that the study looked at was the pathogens that were present in the cats at intake. Healthy cats were swabbed for pathogens, and that was also not correlated with illness. So more cats coming in shedding was not correlated with the amount of illness seen in the shelter. Because we know cats will come in with some illness, but it's really how we care for and house and manage the cats that will make the difference in the level of illness, and not the illness that's presented to us at intake. So really, really interesting. So you say, well, we don't have housing that's of this size. Well, hopefully everyone has met the portal. Cutting holes in our cages to create compartments for our cats and give them more space. This is Dr. Wagner, the inventor of the portal. That's me, helping to install portals. There's the finished product. Sometimes you can even install 2 to give the cats more space and more flexibility with how you use your space. Cat enjoying their portal. Portals can also be up to down. That can work really well, especially in adoption, to make sure all the cats have some living space at eye level. Portals can even be square. Doesn't matter the shape. It just matters that they're installed so that the cats can have the space they need to improve their welfare and keep them healthy. It's also possible to buy cages that already come at the right size with the portal and with the amount of floor space. So remember, more than 8 square feet of floor space. And to be clear, we do love elevated space. You'll notice all of these cages have shelves, which is great. We love it, but that is not included in the floor space calculation. So floor space only is what you count, but we do like the fact that cats have elevated space. All right. Another thing that we have thought as veterinarians was that we need to put cats behind glass, that folks interacting, the public interacting with our cats is what is making them sick, and then spreading it to other cats. So there was a time in shelter design that we wanted to put cats behind glass. But we wanted to challenge this idea as well, because I think we all know that cats sell themselves. People choose cats because of how they're able to interact with people. So can we let people interact? How much risk is it really? So this is not a published study. But it is an exercise that we did back when I was a vet student because we really did want to try to demonstrate the risk of potential adopters petting cats in shelters. So this is my hand, and I went into the bathroom and washed my hands just as we do every day. And then I came back out onto the adoption floor and I pet 3 cats, just as our adopters tend to do, giving them a really good, interaction on the head and under the chin and all that good stuff. And then we took this tool. It's a handheld machine that measures ATP on a surface. And ATP is produced by organic matter, so food residue, bacteria, yeast, mold, all those things have ATP in them. And so this handheld device measures the amount and reads out the results in reflective light units because ATP reflects light. The more material, the more ATP, and thus the higher reflective light units. So this, we measured my hand, and then we decided to measure a scrub top of a shelter worker just to see how it would compare. So my hand after petting 3 cats and a shelter worker who'd been working in the shelter all day wearing this scrub top. The reflective light units measured from my hand was just under 67,000. So there was some organic matter there. Probably I shouldn't, be preparing food, but when we compared it to the scrub top, it had over 2 million, more than 35 times what was on my hand just from petting the cats. So we know that people petting cats is not a big risk for spreading fomites among our cats, especially when we compare it to what we do and we move about the shelter every day. So let's let folks interact. Let them meet the cat that they want to take home. Let them pet the cats, and let the cats choose their person. And just want to touch on a couple points that the environment that the cat lives in is not just their cage. While that is very important, just a few other things to think about that you might even be able to change, even this afternoon. Think about the noise level around our cats. What can you do to keep it quiet? Think about the light, how much natural light is getting in there, and make sure your cats do have their natural cycles as well. The temperature. Cats really do like it warm, and they need it warm to go from REM sleep to non-REM sleep. So make it as warm as you can in the cat rooms, and then give them tools to stay warm. So lots of blankets, hiding spots, ways that they can keep their temperature up and thermoregulate themselves. Also think about what it smells like in there. Give cats as much choice and control over their environment as you can and keep it predictable because bad things are not as bad when we predict that they're coming. Don't let your cat rooms be a main thoroughfare and gathering places for conversations. Try and do that outside of the cat room and keep it to a minimum. And know what's going on with your cats. Do monitor them because cats can give us signs of pending illness or behavior issues. They'll let us know, but we won't pick up on it if we're not monitoring it. And early intervention is a way that we will prevent a lot of illness and behavior problems within our shelter. All right, so we also need to think about how many animals we're caring for. We think about C4C, which I know it's been variably defined, and the understanding of it is a little cloudy. But I want to offer up some understanding and some maybe a different way to think about it, and that it really is a way to manage your shelter that meets the needs of every animal. So in terms of when they come in, the care that they receive, and their outcome. And in a lot of shelters, a lot of communities, this really is going to be a cultural shift, but I want you to embrace it because we've changed a lot of things in our culture over the years, right? And it's about finding what is right for your shelter. And it's based on a lot of things. It is based on how much staff do we have? How many humane housing units do we have? And just so you know, you may have too many based on the other things that you have. So if you don't have a lot of staff, but you have a lot of good housing, filling the housing will still make you over capacity in terms of your staffing level. How long animals stay, either what your target is or how long they actually, what you can achieve, how short can you make that length of stay, and then what is their outcome, right? So all of these things feed into what your true capacity for care is and how you can actively manage your population to this. And it turns out we looked at this too. So we worked with shelters in Canada, helping them implement capacity for care as a way to manage the population in their shelter. And then we wanted to look at the effects that it had on the health of the cats and then outcomes, because it tends to be a common fear of managing a population, getting within your capacity, has to come at the expense of lives. And we wanted to show that that really isn't the case. And if you wanted to read this whole paper, there's a link here that can actually be found in the green resource widget at the bottom of your screen. And in there is this link where you can click on it, and this is an open access article, so you can feel free to read it at your leisure. But since this is a talk about URI, what I wanted to share with you all from this paper is that when we looked at the number of cats housed in isolation, so that was an indirect measure of how much illness each shelter was experiencing. We looked at it before they started actively managing their population compared to after. And you can see that in all three shelters it went down, and pretty dramatically, especially throughout the year, especially in our months of higher intake. That the first shelter, I mean, all of them, they pretty much, by controlling their population, by managing their population, I should say, really did have very few cats housed in isolation. And to be fair, what's not clear here is some of those cats could have come in sick. That is not something we tracked. So this isn't showing shelter-acquired versus illness that came into the shelter. But you can see in all of them dramatic decreases in the number of cats that were housed in their isolation wards. So when you're walking through your shelter and you're thinking about, are we within capacity or not, I want you to think about it this way. I want you to remember this guy. This is a cat in a shelter, housed as we house many of our cats, who wasn't real popular with staff. He would continue to do this to his kennel. He wasn't real popular with adopters because I'm not sure anyone walked by and said, yeah, that's the cat that I want in my house. So his needs are not being met, right? And he's probably not going to have the outcome that he could have were we within our capacity. So when we evaluated it and we were able to give this guy more space and a hiding spot so he could cope, he was no longer messing up his cage, so saving staff time. And now an adopter could see this cat in their home. So now we've given this cat the outcome that he does deserve. So I hope this image helps to explain what we mean by capacity for care and the effect that it will have on keeping our cats, and our dogs for that matter, healthy in our shelters. And now I want Anne to pass it off to Anne so that she can tell you the story of how it looked in her shelter.
Okay, thank you, Cindy, for that. And hello, everybody. I would just like to say how really excited I am to be able to talk to you today and just tell you about some of the things that we did at this shelter where I am at the moment that made an enormous difference. It's a cat-only shelter, as you can see there. It was started in 1947, and when I came here, it was very dilapidated and falling down to the point now that it has been knocked down, and we're in the process of building a new shelter, which is exciting. But that wasn't what I walked into. It's a not-for-profit organisation. It's open admission. We have a permit to have 300 cats on site, which is a bit daunting. We have 2 council contracts. Our current annual intake is about 1,500 per year. We have a rehoming rate of about 85% and a euthanasia rate of 15% roughly, which is only for ill health and temperament only. We do not euthanize for space. As you'll find out, we don't need to. So that's a little bit about what we've got. When I started here back in February in 2016, I walked into a little bit of a challenging situation. Like I said, we had a permit for 300 cats, and we were on our way to achieving that, as you can see. If you look at the bottom line on this table here, you can see the total number of cats that we had on site. Something I probably should just say here, it's obvious to me, but just because you're in the Northern Hemisphere, I'll just let you know that we're back the front. So December for you, I know, is winter, and December for us is summer, and in the middle of kitten season. So a kitten season in Australia, whilst it doesn't completely stop, it tends to start to ramp up about October, November type thing. And come December, we have got lots of little kittens being found and donated to us and all sorts of things. So December, January, February, March are challenging times for us in the Southern Hemisphere because that's our kitten season. That's when you have lots of animals on site. And as you can see, at the end of December 2015 and 2016, we had quite a number of cats on site. And this is what I walked into. I'd just like to say this is actually better than what I actually walked into. These are the remnants of the pens that we had. I've halved the number of these. In fact, I've got them down to probably about a quarter. But we had these pens and cages in pretty much every room, and they were chock-a-block full of cats and kittens, and each one of them would have like a mum and 3 or 4 kittens, or there'd be 4 kittens, or there'd be a cat or something, and they were actually stacked. At the bottom right-hand corner there, those cages were actually doubled up. They were stacked on top of one another, and it was just wall-to-wall kittens and cats. They were just everywhere. It was amazing. I couldn't imagine how people could shoehorn so many cats into one little spot. But as I said, things improved. As Cindy said earlier, sorry, I'll just repeat that a bit because I'm mumbling along here. Dr. Hurley said earlier, I joined the fellowship program, having sat through an expo conference last year, and decided that was exactly what I needed, and the timing was absolutely perfect because you work on a project. And my project was going to be resolving the URI, which we had pretty much everywhere. The place was full of it, like I said. We had approximately probably 90%, maybe not quite, it might have been 80% of the cats on site were on some sort of medication. And so I decided that was going to be my challenge. My challenge was to get rid of the URI. Just another little point down here, I might refer to it as cat flu. Down in Australia, we call URI cat flu. So if I slip into that, that's what I'm actually referring to. I'll just put in this picture here. The pictures of this medication here, which was in the cupboard. We had plenty of it in the cupboard. The doxycycline, obviously, for the cat flu treatment, and the Tricin, which is a broad-spectrum antibiotic eye ointment, obviously associated with the cat flu. And I bought this stuff in anticipation of the next coming summer season, and just to let you know, it's still in the cupboard and it is still unopened. So after 12 months, I actually haven't needed to use this medication at all, because by managing our situation that we had here and changing some of the practices that we were doing, we've actually managed to eliminate cat flu. And I actually, in the past, 18 months now, I haven't had any cats on site break with cat flu. We've had cats come in with some sort of cat flu type things, but none of the cats that we've had in our care in the shelter have actually broken with cat flu. So I was really pleased about that. And this is just to reinforce that if you get your management strategies right, and if you get your housing right, and if you get your numbers right, everything else pretty much just falls into place. One thing that I did get from the fellowship program that I was on there, Dr. Hurley was working with me to try and work out the number of animals that we needed to have as our ideal maximum number of cats on site, because from the previous slide you may remember that we had like 200 or something. So Dr. Hurley worked the numbers through for me, we crunched the numbers, and we came up with 66. And that was the maximum number of animals that we could have on our facility on any one day given our adoption rate, which I'll talk about shortly. And as I've just already said, housing was critical. That was the most important thing that we changed, and that was what made the difference. At the bottom there's a link down to working out a resource down there to work out the number of animals, which is your magic number. So that links through to the shelter medicine from UC Davis, and that will actually help you identify what your magic number is to help you keep the cat flu conditions under control. So as I mentioned just before, how I got to 66, it was using our adoption rate, and I looked at the number of adoptions that we had in February, which is our peak season for kittens, the peak month where we have a lot of animals coming in, and for some reason historical data showed that we had 71 adoptions in February. So with Dr. Hurley's help, we worked out that the 71 animals that were adopted for that month, and there's an average of 30 days in a month if you're looking at the year, so that averaged out to 2 and a bit cats a day that were being adopted. Our length of stay was much longer than a month. Initially, it was several months, and my goal was to get the 2 to 3, sometimes 4 month length of stay down to just 1 month. So we used our number of adoptions per day. So I've got my 2 and a bit cats being adopted per day times my ideal length of stay, which at the time was 28 days, and that's where we got the 67 cats. And so I thought, well, I'll just take one off, and I came back and told all the staff that the number was 66. And so that was what the goal was. We had to go from 230-something cats down to 66. I've just got here just an example to show you of pretty much just what I was talking about. And if you look in the example 2 column, if you halve your length of stay, then it reduces the number of cats that you need to have on site. So it looks like you're actually helping less cats, but you're not, because you're actually moving the cats through faster. And by moving the cats through faster and having them adopted and going out to homes, you decrease your amount of overcrowding on site, and you decrease the amount of stress you have on site, and that just leads to a much better environment for the cats in the shelter. They don't get sick, and they get their homes quickly. The staff, it's better for staff morale, and it's better for the animal, of course, and so then it's a win-win all round. As Cindy was saying, I just wanted to reinforce that housing is critical. The top two pictures, are just pictures of what we had when I first started here. They had, as part of our moving into our new facility, which we still is under construction, they had pre-ordered some of these condos, which is down in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen there. And so some of these were already on site when I started. So they're perhaps not the most ideal type of housing unit to have, because they've got the glass front, and as Cindy previously said, you needed to have some sort of interaction with the cats so that they don't look like they're a museum piece. And so we do have some of these condos on site. My goal, hopefully, would also to be able to include something along the lines of what we have over there on the right. Doesn't necessarily have to be that particular one, but I was hoping to also be able to include on our adoption floor some that have a little bit more vertical space, so that the cats could perhaps get a little bit more mobility and be able to jump up and down, just to give them a bit more exercise, make them attractive to adopters potentially. But just the move from those two pictures on the top, the type of pens on the top to the pen on the bottom, was helpful. You can see that they've got the compartments or the portals in them, which the top one is for food, the bottom one is for the litter tray. We're able to lock the cats into the side there when they're being cleaned, if they trash their room, so to speak. So that reduces that move, it reduces the stress, it provides them with somewhere to go and hide when they've had enough of people and what have you, and it just provides them with another little safe place that they can go and chill out, which is very important for cats and their stress. The changes that I introduced when I first started, and as I said, my fellowship project was to reduce the incidence of cat flu on site. I focused on three main areas here. Now, some of these things that I've mentioned here, some of your shelters may already be doing, some of you may not be doing, but these were the things that I implemented here which had the most effect. And one was animal flow. I tried to make it a one-way path from when the animals came into the shelter to when they went to the adoption floor and home. So I didn't want them going backwards and forwards between the different areas of the shelter. I just wanted them to come from I wanted them to come from admissions and then go into their areas where they did their hold. If they needed to have surgery, they could go possibly straight to the clinic for surgery, then they could go from there out to the adoption area. I did not want for them to be going from their stray hold area, having surgery, for being stressed from the surgery and the move, all the rest of them going back to their stray hold area where they could possibly start to be shedding from the stress and then potentially causing contamination for the other animals in the area. So just by making it a one unidirection movement through the shelter helped with the controlling the disease as well. The population management, well, I've already mentioned how we had to get the numbers down. And that was crucial. And then a foster care program, which may seem quite basic to some of you listening in, but they didn't have a foster care program here. So it was just to get it up and running and started, and we're still building on it. But that is, as those of you that have the program know how valuable that is in getting animals out of the shelter whilst they're recovering, or whilst the little kittens that are actually growing and getting up to weight for surgery, all those types of things. It's just invaluable to get things off site. With the one-way flow through the shelter, we had the supervisor sort of vet weekly meeting. We tried to do rounds on Monday to clean up after the weekend, and Thursday in preparation for the next weekend type thing. We created simple cage cards. This has actually since changed. We just changed it last week. But simple cage cards so that it was easier for me when I'm walking around through checking the animals each day, that I could see what needed to happen. Like, did this one just need a microchip? Was this one already desexed? Did it need to have something else? Did it need a dental? All those types of things. It was just so that it helped me, it gave me an opportunity to get a much more accurate visual picture of what I needed to do so that I could schedule those animals in to have their activities or the procedures done and help get them through the shelter faster. One thing I did change was to reduce the time that they spent on site by making the animals available after their first vaccine. The previous practice was to keep the animals on site until they'd had the whole course of their vaccine. So that could be 3 or 4 vaccines for kittens, and it would be 2 vaccines for adults. So I changed that. I did get a little bit of pushback from some of the staff initially, because they were concerned that the animals were going out and they wouldn't be vaccinated, have their complete vaccination course. But we were able to come around that, and I was able to convince them that it was the right thing to do. And so animals were moving out much faster. Also, animals that, when I first started, they had treatment for cat flu, like eye ointment and so forth. So when they were coming toward the end of their treatment and they actually looked like they were okay, but they just needed another couple of days to finish their medication, I made those available for adoption as well, so that if the new owner wanted to take them home and was happy to complete the medication, they could do that. It's like somebody taking their cat to their local private clinic. You know, they take them, they will be given medication, and they will complete the medication at home. So I just treated them in the same manner as that, and that also moved a lot of cats. So just those two very simple little things increased the flow of the animals through the shelter dramatically, decreased our length of stay from several months to at least 1 month there initially, and that just got the animals out. And that started to reduce the number of animals on site, which reduced my environmental contamination, reduced my stress levels on site, both mine and the cats. And everybody was happy. It was just showing that this was where I was starting to get the staff agreeing that we were doing the right thing, because they could see that we were moving them through, they could see that they were healthier, they could see that the remaining animals on site weren't getting sick, and it was just positive all round. The population management side of things, we started to make surrender appointments for cats coming in. I've done some statistics on the animals that have been coming through, like the admissions that have been coming to the shelter for the past 12 months, and 75%, no, sorry, that's not correct, 65% of our animals admitted into the shelter are from actual owner surrenders. So that's another area for me to focus on now. That's surrender, animal surrenders are an area that I need to make my next task. But what we tried to do here was just encourage them not to just turn up at any time, but to actually make appointments so that we could try and juggle when was the best time to get them in. We weren't telling owners that we didn't want their cats or we weren't going to help their cats. We were just trying to tell them that we were trying to maximize our time and maximize the resources that we have by helping them when we were best able to do so. And quite a few of the owners actually understood, and they were happy to, if they possibly could, hang on to their cats or kittens for a couple more days until we could more comfortably take them into the shelter and deal with them appropriately. Some people were surrendering cats that were a little bit unhappy when they were coming in, and the owners were saying to us, look, if the cat wasn't going to pass the temperament testing in the shelter environment, to let them know, and they would come and collect the cat rather than have the cat euthanized for temperamental issues. And so there were a couple of cats that were like that, and we called the owners up, and the owners have come back in and have taken them and found other alternative accommodation for the cat. So that was a positive thing as well, in that we just reduced the euthanasia and we get a better outcome for the cat. We also have a consultant behaviouralist who is, she comes in as we need her type thing, and she was instrumental in improving our adoption rates for some of the more long-term cats and some of the ones with sort of a little bit more complicated issues. She would assess the cats and provide a plan for the staff here, and also that the staff were able to provide a more accurate profile of the cat to the potential people adopting them. And we were able to actually have all of our more longer-term complicated cats with their behavioural quirky idiosyncrasies be successfully adopted. And then finally, what I've got there to the surrender hold, these are owned cats. The previous vet would hold every cat, either stray or an owner surrender, that came into the shelter for 8 days. And having had a discussion with the local council people, the animal management team at the local council, they agreed for us to reduce that from 8 days down to 2 days, and that 48 hours was in case they changed their mind and they wanted to come back and get their cat, which I actually don't think has actually happened. But that was a huge win for us, because it meant that cat could be available for adoption after 2 days. And what we now do with these surrender animals is we use the open selection method, where we have a section of the adoption floor to these cats that are completing their hold times, their 48-hour hold times, and people can come and interact with these cats, and they can put their name down as an interested party to adopt this cat, and these cats move out straight away as well. They do their 2 days, and if they need surgery, that happens within these 2 days, and then the people come and pick them up, and so they're turned around within 2 days. That was an amazing thing as well, which helped move our cats through. This is just the foster care program that I was talking to you about, and I just redesigned the vaccination card, and I used one of the sections of the vaccination card as a promotion thing, so that the card's designed to last for the cat's life. So with a little bit of opportunity, we've got some lifetime promotion happening for the foster care program. Now, all these little things that I said, they're all little things. We all needed to work with it to get the staff buy-in, but they're all tiny little things, and they didn't cost us any money, and they all added up to a positive outcome. So they all led to decreasing the length of stay and dramatically decreasing it. My incidence of cat flu there or respiratory infection went down from approximately 75% to 2%, which was amazing. We actually ran out of cats and kittens mid-kitten season. So this is just the summer gone last year, the December, January 2016, 2017, we ran out of cats. We then had to bring cats in. We had the opportunity to bring cats in from other rescues, so we're able to help other shelters and rescues. And when we first put this presentation together, we'd already done 3 lots of that. Now we're doing it pretty much every week. We're constantly running out of cats, and we're transferring in every week, and we're transferring in from 2 or 3 different main shelters and pounds just to help them get their load down. In fact, I went around this morning and did a count of the cats that we've got on site available for adoption, and we've got 23 cats on site today. And that includes some that aren't available for adoption. And we've got another dozen cats scheduled to come in this afternoon from one of the rescues, so that we've got some cats available for the weekend. So it's amazing. I mean, we've gone from, I just keep thinking, we've gone from 230 odd cats on site down to 23, and having to almost beg other rescues if they've got something available that we can have, so that we've got something to offer the people that come in to adopt cats. None of this required any additional money, which was amazing. In fact, it saved money. It's amazing. It saves staff time, it saves feeding, it saves cleaning, it saves medication. Some of the cats that I'm transferring in from other shelters have already been desexed and microchipped, so I don't even have to do that. We just sort of possibly worm and flea them. Sometimes they've done that as well for us, and so they don't cost us any money. In fact, it saves us money. The staff now are happy about it. The staff just acknowledge that they don't need to be spending all their time medicating. So in fact, one of the kennel attendants last year said to me she doesn't understand why she doesn't have many cats to medicate. And I'm thinking, well, that's because you're doing something right. So the staff buy-in was important. It took me a little while to get that. So, excuse me. It took me a little while to get the staff buy-in, but you get that by, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. So you walk the talk and you get the achievement, and then once they see it, then they've got it. And then I just thought I'd like to share this with you with regard to the number of animals that we now have. And I've compared the summer season for us, the kitten season, from when I first started in 2016 to the last kitten season just gone. And the numbers on site, you can see, just look at the bottom row, that's the big one, where it's gone from 139 there, 153, 226, and we're down to single figures. And there is that one there in March where we had 96 cats come in, but there were a lot of little kittens that came in, and a lot of those went straight out to foster care, and then we got down to 69 cats and kittens, which was close enough to 66. So I I didn't say anything, but so we're well under the numbers that we're allowed to have on site, and we don't have any disease. So what worked? What worked for us was knowing your capacity for care. That's what Cindy's been talking about. Using tools that are appropriate for you and your shelter, and actually getting the best out of them. Having pathways for the cats so that you know what needs to happen to them, and you can make sure that you actually achieve things and you can get things done that they require and help them move through the system faster. The foster care program was particularly successful for us. Introducing the new housing units so that there was some extra space, and there was the portal so that the cats had somewhere to go and hide. And everything just worked. Like I said, you reduce a couple of the length of stay, you improve the situation, and it's a win-win all round. So it was fantastic. Very easy to do once you put your mind to it. So I think that's probably about it. It's from what I've got to say and what worked for us. So just wanting to know if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask.
We actually have tons of questions. Cynthia Karsten, this one's for you. So this didn't feel like it was an exact prescription for URI at face value. What do you have to say about that?
I'm assuming they mean for the treatment of URI?
Yes.
Our goal with this, and we hope that it can be in most shelters, is that we actually want to prevent URI. There has been nothing new in terms of research or great happenings in the shelter world in terms of treating URI. It's not fun to treat. It's much more fun, and we want to work to prevent it. So we hope that we've given some tools to prevent URI in the shelter. It's really, really, really what we want to go for, because that's what we've found that works. Because, again, nothing new in the treatment regime for shelters. So my prescription would be giving cats space, be it 8 square feet for them in cage space. And I did see some questions about, does that count elevated space? As much as we love cats to have elevated space and we want them to have it, you cannot count that in your 8 square feet. You also cannot count that in your 18 square feet per cage per cat when they're housed together. So, and I know it can feel impossible to give cats that much room, but folks, we got to do it. We have to find a way, because if not, if we're not able to house cats correctly, the way they need and want to be housed, we will continue to fight this battle against feline URI. That is just the way it goes. The other part of our prescription is trying to keep them where they are, direct housing, avoiding any moves that we can for the particular cat as they move along their pathway in our shelter, and then respecting your capacity for care, knowing it and sticking to it for everyone's benefit. That is my prescription for URI.
Thank you, Dr. Karsten. Next question. Do you find that communal rooms with a number of cats free roaming in them is less or more stressful than cage living?
I can start with this, and Anne, certainly if you have anything to add. You know what? It depends on the cat. It really does. And so I think that's understanding cat language, being really good with your monitoring is all very important to know what the particular cat enjoys. And we really don't recommend putting in any more than 4 to 5 cats together, even if the room is ginormous. Try and make smaller rooms and have fewer cats, because it's very stressful to introduce another animal. Kind of mixes up the whole, mojo and everything that's going on in the room. So again, it depends on the cat, and it's also good to have a variety of housing both for the cats and for the adopters, right? Some people, how people interact with animals is varied as well. Mm-hmm. So important to have both from the cat's perspective and the adopters. So however it's done, good monitoring, knowing your cats, being able to decide if their welfare is being met is the most important thing in terms of the housing that's provided.
Absolutely. 2 questions that are similar. What if it's just impossible to give more than 8 square feet? And on top of that, what if we need to double up cats?
Again, I mean, I think that's a conversation that needs to be had, and why is it impossible needs to be the question, and then what can we do to address those impossibilities? Because there's always something, honestly, there is. And doubling up, that gets complicated. So I think it's getting creative, and I think it's recognizing that not being able to do it has to come off the table. Otherwise, welfare and health will continue to be challenged. That is a bottom line.
Well, that was exactly what we had when I started there. We had cats doubling up, and they didn't have, your 8 square feet of space, and that was what was directly contributing to my 90-odd% of sick cats. So I would say you'd need to actually do the exact opposite if you're wanting to get rid of, your infection and so forth.
Yeah, it will continue to be a struggle. Oh, sorry.
If you're on a municipal contract and the animal care officers have to pick up cats as well as the public, the question is, we by county law have to take in stray cats. We can get as many as 30 a day. How do you suggest handling capacity for care when you have to take all the stray cats and then hold them for a mandatory stray period?
So that is a whole webinar on its own, a whole conversation on its own. I would encourage you to check out the Million Cat Challenge and the webinars that are already on there about how this has been dealt with at different shelters, because the answer to this is out there, and there are you guys know I could answer this question and go on about all the things that would need to happen, but that's not why we're here today. So reach out to those around you who have already solved this problem. Look at the resources that are out there, because again, I know the pressure to take in these cats exists, and we need to remove that pressure, be it through changing ordinances, through how we manage when animals come in. It's a complicated situation that can be dealt with, but I'm here to tell you this can be dealt with. And it doesn't come with euthanizing the animals that come in. It comes with making different decisions, making them faster, questioning who needs to come in today, and really communicating to your community, those in charge, those that live within your community, that taking in stray cats over who you can care for, A, doesn't do anything to the number of cats that are out and about in your community, and B, makes it really challenging for anyone to do a good job inside the shelter, both for the people and the animals who are cared for in there. So it just becomes a whole other way of looking at how do we manage cats in our community is basically the question that needs to be asked here to make it better for the people who you're serving, and most importantly, the cats and the people who you're managing.
That's finding that right balance of alternatives to intake, managed admissions, removing barriers, and return to field.
Yes, those would all be tools.
Yes. Wonderful. Dr. Karsten, what is the realistic length of stay for cats?
We, so, I love the names of there. Goal that we try to shoot for that is less than 14 days is a good goal on average. We love it when cats can move faster. We love it when cats don't even have to come in. But a goal to work for on average would be 14 days, and then finesse it from there. Understanding some are going to stay longer and some are going to leave really quickly.
Sounds good. Next question is, I understand that the best medicine is to do these things to eliminate stress. So the answer is in prevention. But if a cat is already symptomatic, is there a need to medicate?
Oh, goodness. It depends on what the clinical signs are. And it's just like when we get the flu, when we get cat flu, which is what it is. You know, sometimes supportive care is what it takes. You know, so it depends on what you're seeing as the clinical signs in the animal. It depends on what supportive care can be done. I treated a lot of URI as a intern by removing the cat from the filter, by taking it home, and no other medication. So it depends.
You've got a big echo, Cindy.
What's that?
You've got a big echo.
I know. I'm hoping. I'm just trying to push through and waiting for it to go away.
Sorry, everybody. We are trying to hold on. And can you tell us what tricin is?
Tricin, it's just sort of your standard, what's the word I'm trying to think of?
Medication. We call it Neopolybac. It's an eye ointment.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. That clarifies.
Oh, I see. So I thought you were asking me what was in it, and I was trying to remember what was in it because I didn't have the box under my nose to be able to read the ingredients.
Dr. Karsten, you mentioned sunlight transmission earlier and the amount of contamination that's on the scrub top. Would you recommend changing scrub tops between cats and between clean kennels?
Or wearing like a disposable gown?
I do not expect people to change their scrub top between cats. So thank you for bringing this up. But we do recommend changing tops between dirty and clean activities. So once you're all done cleaning for the day, it's not a bad idea to clean yourself up a bit, spiffy it up a bit. If you have the same staff doing multiple duties, and if you're dealing with healthy animals, so and adults, not as concerned about fomite transmission. We need to be more careful with our juveniles and our vulnerable ones. But no, don't go crazy with that. That was more to illustrate, relative risk. But to be aware of the activities that you're doing in the shelter, and then once those are done, what could you do to, clean yourself up a bit? And obviously, if you're dealing with things such as ringworm, we have special protective gear that we want to wear for that, both for the cat safety and our own. But the routine cleaning of healthy cats, do not ask your staff to change their tops. You'll get very funny looks and likely not much compliance. And so we want to make sure we put in the protocols where we need them so that we get the compliance when it's needed and we can relax a little bit when the risk is not as high.
And let the people pet the kitties.
Let them pet the kitties.
Let them pet the kitties. So in group housing, when you're adding a new cat to the group, what is the best protocol to reduce the URI flare-ups that are of cats that are already in the group?
I think, what it comes down to is meeting the needs of all the cats that are in the group, right? So ensuring that everyone is afforded a hiding spot, a place that they like to be, to reduce the competition. So you also need enough feeding stations, you need enough litter boxes. And to really, if cats are turning over quickly, then group housing probably isn't the best because that changes the social structure frequently. Cats that you've already identified as possibly will have a longer stay, prioritize them for the housing that's grouped. And your fast trackers, ones that are going to move, can have the nicer cage housing. And then just being very diligent about monitoring and making sure that the cats are doing okay and have the tools they need to cope. And if even with the tools they aren't able to cope, then changing it up.
And remind us one more time, square foot on group housing.
On what, sorry?
Remind us one more time, what's that recommended square footage on group housing?
recommended square footage is 18 square feet. That's floor space per cat.
Exactly.
And really not having groups larger than 4 or 5 cats. Really
than 4 or 5 cats.
And litter mates would be perfect. If you have like the people coming with litter mates, that would be perfect in group housing.
So as a staff member, what are your suggestions on how to get the buy-in from the rest of your team, your director, the municipal shelter open admissions? How do you convince people to get on board with C4C? When you're already feeling so overcrowded, how do you convey less is more?
It's really getting the results. And it's really finding a few key people that, you know, are willing to let you have a go. And with their support, and you just go through and you start to implement things, and you implement things sort of like slowly and maybe 1 or 2 things at a time so that the staff can cope with the different changes. And it depends too on your staff as well. I mean, if they're keen for change or if they like what's just been ticking along. So that, you know, you pick your army, so to speak, and pick your team and start and just introduce one thing at a time. And it's the results will speak for themselves, and the results will actually sway the opinions, and then that's what will give you more momentum to do a few more challenging or sort of out there type of things as well. So, and once the ball starts rolling, you know, it just keeps going.
That's such a good point, Anne. The proof is in the pudding. So going back to that magic number you were talking about, of finding our capacity and staying there, are you including cats and kittens that are in foster care in that number?
No, because they're off-site. I'm only dealing with the animals that are on-site in the shelter environment, the stressful situation, because it's much less stressful in a house environment, home environment, and so I don't count those in my numbers. But then obviously when they come back into the shelter for their surgery and so forth, they then become part of the 66.
And I think it's...
So speaking of...
Sorry?
When you're looking at your capacity numbers, remembering though that the ones out in foster care do likely still need surgery, and they do also need an outcome. So when you are thinking about your capacity, while it may not be the number on site that day, you can't forget about them, because they too will play into the resources of your shelter, so for surgery and for outcomes. So when we're doing the calculations, then when thinking about it, just don't forget about them. And also just, I loved Anne's point about how to get people on board with C4C, and I would really challenge everyone to just think about how things are in the shelter, and you know, start to put the question out to people like, really, how's it going? And why not try something different? Because if things aren't going well, then they can only get better. So let's try some different ideas. Let's try one thing. Let's see what it does. And exactly as Anne said, you start to see results, and then you try something else. And it will happen slowly but surely. When you trust in it.
Is it necessary to test every cat or kitten for FIV, FELV, and deworm them before putting them on the adoption floor?
That's also the topic of another webinar. Deb, the whole testing kittens and cats for retroviruses is a discussion on its own, but I will talk about deworming, yes, from an animal perspective, from a zoonotic perspective, from a health and well-being perspective. All cats and dogs, for that matter, should be dewormed on intake and should be set up with a deworming protocol, and you should work with your veterinarian to establish that, because it's really important. So not just before putting them on the adoption floor, but the minute they come in the door.
On intake, yes.
Okay, and we have quite a few questions left, but I don't want to take too much advantage of your time, so we're just going to end here with this last one. Do you not use an intranasal FBRC for URI prevention at intake anymore?
Jury's out on that
We
one.
don't.
There's some shelters find it helps and some shelters do not. In the study, that was not something that was associated with being across the board in the shelter. It was not the shelters. It was not a factor that was found to be significantly protective for preventing URI and the disease that they were seeing. So generally the recommendation is you can try it in your shelter, but be sure to keep track of if it's helping or not, because studies have gone both ways, and in my experience, shelters have found it goes both ways. Sometimes it helps and sometimes it doesn't. But to be clear, if you are using an intranasal, you do also need to use a parenteral vaccine because you do need the protection for panleukopenia, which comes from the parenteral vaccine.
Okay, so we know there are a lot of questions that didn't get addressed, and again, we're so sorry for any difficulties today. If you have a question and we didn't have time for it today, can you please email us at info@millioncatchallenge.org so we can answer it, post it, and share it. Your questions are very valuable, and we don't want to miss any of them. We'd like to thank our presenters for holding on today. That was a bumpy ride. Thanks for pulling through. Thanks to Maddie for supporting the challenge and hosting this webinar. And of course, thank you. We know you're busy today and you have much to get done. We appreciate you taking the time to spend this hour with us. And just a reminder to save the date now for our next webinar that's on Tuesday, November 14th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Guest presenter Bridget Watson of Missing Pet Partnership will examine why fewer than 2% of lost pet cats who enter shelters will ever see home again, and how do we beat those odds. Lastly, to find the link to this presentation and to learn more about capacity for care or join the Million Cat Challenge, please visit www.millioncatchallenge.org. Thank you so much.